67% of people asked in a particular survey said that they had or were thinking of leaving a job because of a bad manager. If they can do it properly, the business flourishes. The people in the business absolutely flourish and they start to really love their career. They become more motivated, they become more kind of engaged, and the founder becomes happier. When people really struggle with boundaries, when people really struggle to close their laptop at the end of their working day, I get them to answer 3 questions, and they are...
Hi, Alex. Welcome to the show today. Let's kick off just by getting some context. What do I need to know about you?
It's a big question. Well, I was born in probably the couple of the biggest facts. So I grew up in the military. So my dad is military, he's Air Force, was his entire career. And my mum worked as well. She was a lead practice nurse. And so I grew up, work was like, your career was a big thing. It was, you working was a really big, important part of your life. Watching both my parents be successful in their jobs was a big thing for me growing up. And I think I just internalized, okay, like having a career. And I say a career very, I had very strong thoughts about what constituted a career. And as it turns out, I had no idea what a career could actually look like. So I ended up kind of being that classic person that kind of did this, that, and everything. And as it turned out, one of my first jobs was as a recruiter. And I used to look for these perfect CVs that, you went to university, you did a specific degree, you then went and you did a job, your entry-level job made sense from your degree, and then you climbed the ladder. It was all very vertical, and there were these beautiful CVs. And I did not have that CV. Like, my CV looked like a spider had died in ink and landed on the page. And it's funny because now I look back, every single thing that I've learned, every single thing that I've done, they all have people at the core. So whether it was working in a medical center, whether it was working as a recruiter, whether it was working in HR, like everything was all very, very people-centered. But I was still really convinced that, you had to do well, you had to be successful. And it's not that my parents ever told me, if you don't reach a certain level, we won't be proud of you. But I was so driven by my career. And I was so, I'm an independent, I'm a strong, independent woman, and I'm going to have an amazing career and it's going to be brilliant. And as it turns out, and I loved it. Don't get me wrong, I loved my career. And I spent, coming up to the anniversary of the Big C that we don't talk about.
Yeah.
But that was a huge turning point for me, because on the 23rd of March, 2020, I was finishing a £7 million office redesign and move. So I'd taken this blank shell, I'd designed it, I'd built it out, I'd worked out the tech frame out, I'd got all of the furniture bespoke, I'd put murals on the wall, and I'd created this space where our office was going to move across. And on the 23rd, I did the office move by myself with 8 removals guys.
Yeah.
And I listened to Boris announce that we were going into lockdown as I emptied boxes. And I've never been back to that office. Literally never stepped foot in it again. I've never seen it in action. It took me 6 months to build, and I've never seen it used, which is wild to think about. And I don't regret a single thing. Don't regret. I went home. My boyfriend texted me and said, "Do you really want to spend lockdown in your 3rd floor, 1-bed flat in Walthamstow where there are no shops nearby?" And I was like, no, actually I don't.
No.
And so I ended up moving up to North Yorkshire. And ironically, he's in the military as well.
Okay.
So I'm a glutton for punishment when it comes to the military lifestyle. And I ended up living in the mess with him for 3 months. And I can't go back. I can never, ever go back to that lifestyle, because I was just working and working and working, and there was no life. There was no actual enjoyment of life. I was doing the classic live for the weekend, but the weekend was always, it started Saturday morning. It finished lunchtime on a Sunday, because then I went back into work mode.
Yeah.
So that for me has really created what I do now, and is really the trigger for what I do now of, it's okay to love what you do and be ambitious and really want to succeed and really want to have a career that, you know, drives you and be driven by a love of what you do. But like, don't forget the life part as well.
Yeah. I mean, are you seeing I mean, talking about career, and you
Mm,
mentioned it earlier on, that sort of, almost very linear sort of system. And lots of people would do that. They would start a job straight
yeah.
out of college or uni or school, possibly,
Hmm.
and just build their way up. And they had a job, and that was a
Yeah.
job for life. But we're seeing a huge number of people changing jobs very quickly.
Yeah.
And I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the work has just changed. The work culture has changed, and you know our parents did, like you say, they started their jobs. My dad worked for the Air Force from the age of 16 to the age of 65.
Yeah.
That was it. You know, my mum worked for the NHS her whole career, and I think there are still some people who will do that. But I think we've just realized that there is so much more out there that we can do, and actually some of the better workers are the workers that have had more like a broader experience, you know, the people that have
Mm.
been in different workplaces and seen different things and been exposed to multiple different things. They're the ones that can do more ultimately. So yeah, there's definitely a shift in the perfect CV. It doesn't really exist anymore.
No, you do see that in some larger companies bringing in a
Yeah.
CEO from a completely different industry, because
Yes.
actually quite often, I say traditional companies or traditional industries, they do it because that's the way they've always done it.
Hmm.
This is how we do it. And then someone
Yeah.
comes in and is a complete disruptor because they start to bring things in
Yeah.
from other sides, and that, like you say, can be a real positive.
It really can. It's my least favorite phrase. It is, but we've always done it this way.
Yeah.
It's my favorite one to be like, cool, I'm gonna trash it then. I'm gonna break it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna turn that around to make that go away because if you've always done it, it's probably not efficient, it's probably not useful, and there's probably a better way. So let's find it.
Yeah. You spoke then about sort of, not wanting to go back, and people
Hmm.
now, probably yourself included, wanting that more of a balance. And I think we've
Yeah.
all had that Sunday syndrome where actually,
Yeah.
like you say, we enjoy Saturday, but Sunday we don't really enjoy because we're just thinking about Monday.
Monday. Yeah.
And do you think, the situation that happened 5 years ago has
Yeah.
been a big catalyst on reframing people's thoughts around work and work-life balance?
I think definitely. I think it couldn't help but be that. I mean, for me, it was because my boyfriend, he's now my husband, but at the time, boyfriend was he was in the military, so I only saw him at the weekends because he was
Mm.
wherever he'd got posted, and I was based in London. He was not based in London ever.
No.
So we only saw each other at weekends, which meant there was a 300-mile drive at either end of our weekend because one of us had to travel.
Yeah.
Um, and suddenly getting to watch TV with him on a Wednesday afternoon or a Wednesday evening, and instead of texting him about the program we were both watching, just talking out loud about it.
Yeah.
And it was amazing how much extra life suddenly got fitted in. I do think there's been a bit of a turn back, though. You know, it's been 5 years, and
Mm.
I think people are forgetting how wild it was to suddenly have all of this free time and complete autonomy over what you wanted to do with it, because so many of us were furloughed. We weren't allowed to work. Even if we
Yeah.
wanted to, we weren't allowed to work. And so there was this, well, but who am I if I don't have work? What do I do if I don't have work? And I think that was such a revelation for so many people.
Yeah, I've certainly been guilty of that, of almost like attaching my personal identity to the work that I do.
Yeah.
And like you say, if you can't do that, I mean, I was lucky I managed to carry on working, but
Hmm.
it was a complete shift. But it changed many things. And I live down on the south coast, and we saw a huge influx of people then wanting to move into the area because they
Yeah.
realised, actually, I can work from home. I don't want to live in the city. I
Yeah.
want nature and the beach and things like that on my doorstep. And that
Absolutely.
has changed things. But we are seeing that a little bit of a pushback, aren't we, at the moment, with
Hmm.
people saying people need to get back in the office and things like that. I mean,
Yeah.
where do you sit on all of that?
I I think hybrid working is the way forward. I think there's so many things that you just can't do as well as you can do in person. You know, onboarding someone, training someone, especially, you know, new to work people. So when they come out of university or school and they've never had a working life, and there are so many, you know, even tiny little etiquette things, and there's so many parts of the working life that they're not getting to enjoy. And, you know, I don't even know how old I was, 30 something, 31 when COVID happened. So I had a huge group of people that I'd known day in, day out that I could still message and still hang out with. But if you've never been into the office, if you've never developed those personal skills, you've never picked up friends, then it can be incredibly isolating. So I do think there's a lot to be said for the benefits of being in an office and the social side, and even the innovation side of just having those back and forths where you sort of go, I've got an idea. Can you help? What do you think? Shall we talk it out? Oh, no, that's a terrible idea. Let's not go with that. Oh, actually, this has got legs. We should do something about this. But I could personally never give up my home office. I am so productive from home compared to in an office. It's, you know, it's quieter. I've got more concentration. I've got my stuff around me. I know where everything is. And I think people, you know, it was proven over and over and over again. The studies prove that people are more productive working from home, but are they happier? Remains to be seen.
Yeah,
so I think that's why the balance. Yeah,
building up some of those soft skills, and that's, you know, that you do develop, because actually when you look at someone's CV, technically they might be brilliant, but actually you only build up those soft skills, the communication skills, when you're in an office and connecting with people. And I can imagine certainly seeing people coming out of uni into their first job, actually, if they're just working from home. And quite often I've seen situations where certainly people coming out of uni or college and working, actually, they're still living at home with parents. So they end up working from their bedroom pretty much.
Yes.
And, you know, then you never get out. So there is that, I guess, on a personal level, there's sort of, you know, mental health side of, is this particularly healthy? I'm a big believer in that sort of hybrid work as well, because actually different locations suit different types of work. You know, I work really well in a coffee shop when just being creative and coming up with some ideas. But actually, if I've got deep work to do, I need to be in my home office where you know, I can just literally close the door and crack on. And I think that's maybe where companies need to have that discussion, that actually it's not a get everyone back to the office. It's okay, people need to meet up for certain tasks. But actually, when it comes to doing the work, working from home is absolutely fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So explain sort of what you do now and what your purpose and your drive is.
Yeah, so I've been through a bit of a cycle with my business. So I started, when I left my career, I was doing operations. So I started doing operations kind of done for you. Very quickly realized that was a terrible idea, because it was so demanding, it was so full on. So I went into consulting and did operations consulting. So kind of going in and looking at businesses and going, how can we make this more streamlined? How can we make it more efficient? How can we make more profit? Get the costs down? And slowly but surely kind of talking to people and working with all these employees and the senior managers and the founders, I realized that one of the biggest problems is the people. Is actually, you know, either people kind of really trying to hold on to what they know the best, which is normally the least efficient. And, you know, founders are the biggest bottleneck in any business without fail, because they just want to keep all their fingers in all of the pies and have every decision go through them. And actually, that's the least efficient way. And also just really damages them. And so I kind of started going through this process of kind of almost having to counsel founders and say, you have to let go, that you can't, if you want your business to flourish, first and foremost, you're the thing that's limiting its growth the most. But secondly, you are damaging your own health. Like, you are making life difficult for yourself. You're making your home life uncomfortable. Like, by forcing yourself to do a job that's really hard for no reason, you're making everything worse. Like, just let go. And obviously, just let go is such an easy thing to say, and it's such a hard thing to do. There's so much trust that comes with delegating, that comes with kind of backing off and stepping out of the day to day. But almost always, two things happen. If they can do it properly, the business flourishes. The people in the business absolutely flourish, and they start to really love their career. They become more motivated. They become more kind of engaged, and the founder becomes happier, starts to spend more time with their family, starts to spend more time on things that they truly love. They start to sleep better. I get texts being like, I didn't dream once about work last night. And I love those texts because they make me so happy that, wow, okay, this person's starting to really see I can have this incredible business and the business is doing better than ever. And I'm happy and I feel at peace and I'm calm and I have freedom. Most of us that started businesses, we wanted to do it for freedom and flexibility. And then we chain ourselves to a desk. Like, yes, that's not freedom or flexibility. That's a terrible idea. So that's now what I do mostly. So I do still do some consulting, but mostly I coach with founders and work with them on kind of that process of letting go and how to step out so that they can either exit plan to sell the business or pass it on to someone else in the business. I work with a lot of family businesses, so succession planning, or just, accept that the business, when they decide they're going to retire, just ceases to exist because they are their business and there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. You kind of have to plan for it early.
To allow it to, be a little bit more seamless and not be the headache. Because you're right. I mean, I launched my own business and built up a team, and I've seen it with lots of people that I know. Yeah. That you just end up, it is your baby, and therefore you do everything. And, we regularly put on that superhero cape of if a team member's struggling with something, put it on my plate as well. And, I'll come in and save the day. And we just carry on working and working and working. And that, like I mentioned earlier, almost becomes your identity. And, the hustle culture comes in. And, if you're not working a minimum 12 hours a day, then clearly your business is never going to do anything. Yeah, you're not, what's the point?
Yeah.
But it is that switch of actually stepping away from the business, working on the business, I guess, rather than just necessarily in it, but also trusting other people, because actually that motivates your team as well, doesn't it? When you
hugely
trust them.
Yeah, and I don't know whether you can see behind me, obviously I'm a bit addicted to books, but this entire shelf is all leadership, communication, kind of culture, motivation, and they all agree, like the whole the kind of motivational blueprint that we used to follow, which was, if you do this, then I'll reward you. And if you don't do this, then I'll punish you, just really does not work. Like it really is just pointless at this point. But actually trusting in people, allowing people some autonomy, going, hey, why don't you go and work it out yourself? I'm here, I will help you, but why don't you come back to me with an answer? And watching them come back and go, I think I found the answer. And they have so much more excitement and engagement because they're trusted. And that's all it takes to keep them the most motivated. People grow, and whilst it's sometimes easier and quicker to go, oh, I can just fix that for you, them fixing it themselves, better for the business. And it's also better for them. They've learned something new. They've built a skill that they can rely upon in the future because you've learned it by having to do that yourself. By refusing to let other people have that opportunity, you hinder them, you hold them back.
Yeah, and we often hear, I mean, it's a little bit cliched, but that whole sort of, people don't leave jobs, they leave bad managers.
Bad managers, yeah.
And that is that lots of people, whether they're starting a business, they started a business quite often because they were a good technician. They probably worked for someone else before and thought, I could do this better, earn more, work less. So they've started that way, or they've fallen into a leadership role by, again, being good at their job. People who are good at their job get promoted.
Yeah.
But being good at your job is different to being good with managing people and leading people.
Yeah. So I have some great stats on that. So
go on then.
67% of people asked in a particular survey said that they had or were thinking of leaving a job because of a bad manager. And 82% of managers have had no formal training and are what are referred to as accidental managers. If they've been given a team, but they've never been taught how to manage, they've never been taught how to lead. And that's how we create this cycle, as we were talking earlier about people skipping and leaving jobs. Sometimes it's because they're interested in different areas, but mostly it's because they just don't want to be stuck in a job where a manager is terrible.
It's such a common story, isn't it? You see these awful managers, and know it's very easy actually to blame the manager, but like you say, there huge number have never received any training in how actually to manage. They were clearly good technicians at that point. I'm sure some people have been promoted unethically or whatever, but the majority were good at their job, which is why they've moved up, or they've been there the longest. But you know, what do people need to start understanding about leadership then? If they're in a leadership role or a manager role, what can they start to do?
So it's all about communication. It's all about, but it's not just communicating and learning how to say the right words. So I often, if I do, I often do workshops. So I'll take a bunch of people and they go, right, so what are the phrases I need to use to be a good manager? I'm like, you can't learn by script, right? There's no script, but it's about recognizing the other human in front of you and sort of going, okay, how does this person operate? How does this person communicate? How does this person best take feedback? What's going on for them outside of this exact situation? Because you never know kind of exactly. Some people love, I've got a colleague who loves feedback. Like if she does something or she can improve something, she loves to be told, hey, if you did it like this, like that would flow really, really well. And she loves that. And constructive criticism to her is like a love language. She thinks it's brilliant because it's helping her progress and it's other people interested in her getting better. And I've known other people who even the small amount of constructive feedback would be like, oh my God, you think I'm terrible, I'm going to get fired. This is awful. Knowing the difference between the two, knowing how to approach that sort of things. I think, first and foremost, everyone ought to have some management training, and there is so much out there these days. Like it's really not hard to access management training. But I think the very first thing that people can do is just take a step back and kind of go, is this life or death? Or can I take a moment to really assess what I need to get out of this conversation before I just barrel in and go, oh my God, everything's on fire. You need to just fix it. This is all terrible. Because that's what a lot of managers will do.
That life or death situation is very key. We see it on a daily basis. I mean, I've probably been guilty of it at a time of, over egging how important this tiny actual issue is, and therefore probably demoralized someone on their work rather than being like, should we just make this change here? But it is that understanding of how people like to be treated and how they like to receive feedback. I mean, I've had a colleague where if I dropped them a message saying, oh, can we have a quick catch up, their mind straight away said, I'm getting fired. Whereas, now it gives some context. Why do we need this catch up, so on, so on, and just put someone's mind at rest. And also do it as soon as possible. Don't say, can we have a catch up tomorrow at 4 p.m? Because basically they will do nothing between now and tomorrow at 4 p.m. because all they're doing is worrying that they're about to get fired.
Exactly.
So it's, understanding. I mean, I guess there is a little bit of human psychology in there, but equally just being human and understanding the bigger picture.
Exactly. And, I always use the example of in my team, I had an accountant. And honestly, when I tell you I love this man, like he is the sweetest, loveliest guy. But we butted heads all the time at the beginning of our relationship. We came up against each other. We were always so frustrated with each other. And I was always like, oh my God, just do the goddamn job that I've asked you to do. And he'd be like, ugh. And it took us a while. And eventually we were like, right, we've got to sort something out. There's something going wrong with how we communicate. So we went and we sat down. And the difference was I had a lot of pressure coming down from the directors. They needed answers very, very quickly. I didn't understand accounts. Like, I'm not a maths person.
No.
So I just wanted him to give me the high level information so that I could pass it on. Just needed to have a decent amount of information that when I went into the meetings, I could answer questions. But he was a really detail-oriented person. He loved to talk through his working out. He wanted to show me the whole big picture and then help me decipher which were the bigger numbers that I needed to take. And I just didn't have time for that. But he felt like I never listened to him, and I felt like he was always trying to give me too much and never listened to what I was asking. And it was as simple as we compromised so that when we had time and when I didn't have a huge amount of pressure and I wasn't literally about to walk into a meeting, we would go through the numbers together and I would listen to him. And I actually developed a huge amount of understanding of what he did because I took the time to really listen. But when I was under pressure and when I was about to run into a meeting, he would give me the top 3 and he would just hand them to me and he'd be like, this is what you need to know. This is the reasons why, off you go. And suddenly we went from being incredibly frustrated by each other to being able to go, this is an A situation or a B situation. This is how we need to react. Let's go. And he was probably one of my best friends in that organization by the end of it because we learned how to communicate in the way that was most suited to each other. And we didn't have to, it wasn't one person going, oh, I now have to completely change the way I always communicate. It was just respecting, we communicate in different ways. And therefore, all we need to do is just recognize that and know that in certain situations, we'll have to compromise. That's it.
Do you think the sort of the disc profile like that we often do with people, that detailed and do you think that's still valid? Because you've got it there. Look at that. There we go. I mean, let's talk about that briefly because I know that I'm top level, you know, and if someone sends me a document, I'm reading what's in bold. I'm not reading the rest of it. Again, I just want to know the top level so I can make a quick decision and then move on. Whereas, like you say, other people want to know all the details. And I've learned this when writing proposals that I now say to people, what do you want to see in this proposal?
Yes.
Because otherwise I'd think, oh, they need all of this detail maybe and put it in. Or equally think, look, this is roughly what we're going to do and this is how much it's going to cost. That's fine. But they're like, no, I need every little detail. What's the exact timescale? What's the steps? You know, so it's adjusting it for each people. So for people who don't know what a disc profile is or the profiling, give me the top level. Top level on
the top level. So I have these books. I've had these since I got put through an insights program when I was very early 20s, like 23 maybe. And it was really interesting because at the time, my profile sat like this. I think it was this. Oh, no, it wasn't. It was this. There we go. It was those two. So that was my profile when I first started. So green being hugely empathetic, very kind of worrying about people's feelings, worrying about, you know, really caring about what people are thinking, what's going on with them at the time. Yellow is very sociable. They're the kind of the social butterflies. They like to be involved in everything. In fact, this one literally says, involve me. They like to be a part of everything. They like to kind of move themselves around. They tend to be really great communicators. Your blues are very kind of detail oriented. They want to know the high level. They want to know all of the fine detail. They want to really take their time and make a really truly informed decision. And then your reds tend to be the slightly more fiery. They tend to be more kind of quick fire, like yourself. They want the high level and only the high level. Quite often they're confused for like the type A personalities. So sort of your classic CEO, just give me the top, like, I don't have time for you, I'm so busy, I'm so important. That's not necessarily always true. It's just that they make decisions based on smaller amounts of information. They kind of assimilate quicker and they tend to be a bit faster at doing that. So when I first started, this was my profile. And actually now my profile sits more like this because I'm now far more red.
Yeah.
And that's you know, it's been probably 15 years or so since I did the profile. And, you know, it does change. You do evolve as a person. And as I've developed more confidence, I've got more ability to make those fast decisions, more ability to kind of go, I can do this really quickly. I don't need all of the details. And actually, probably one of your standard kind of engineering kind of people. I'm quite lazy. I don't want to spend all the time digging into absolutely everything. I want to have that fast motion. But I still really care about people and communication. And I think you mentioned earlier about purpose. So I told you what I do, but my purpose is about getting people to enjoy their life more. I want more people to have that balance. I want people to think I said, when you were first looking for people to come onto the podcast, what I said to you was I don't want people to have regrets on their deathbed. There's a book that I have read that I adore that's been probably the center of my business for the entirety of its 5 years, which is called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. It's by a palliative care nurse called Bronnie Ware. She was in Australia. And she basically, throughout the book, she tells her story of her life, but also these people that she cared for as they were reaching their dying days. And the second regret that she talks about is, I wish I hadn't worked as hard. These people that missed out on their children's life, they missed out on, small things growing up that actually, they get to the end and they're like, what was it even worth it? I look back and what have I taught them? I've taught them that only money is important. And I now don't have those memories to kind of to fuel me. So I think that level for me, that kind of when you're communicating with people, when you're talking to them throughout the whole business from founder all the way down, respecting that people, there's more to life than work. Like, they're here to work. They want to do their best job. You want to enable them to do their best job. You want to allow them to be successful and to be ambitious. But there is more to life than just work. We're not put on this planet to choose a career and stick to it forever. It's about fueling our life and giving ourselves something to do that we enjoy, but that ultimately pays for us to have a good life.
I guess work, has to serve a couple of purposes of that one, maybe giving you a bit of a purpose, something you're excited in because you're doing it, but equally then just providing you with that income to be able to do other things as well. Because actually, if you're just going to work, you hate it, and you're only just earning enough to be able to maybe do something on a Saturday, then it's so out of kink that actually it's just not enjoyable. So, I often think, work can really benefit people from the fact of it gives us something to do. And I know lots of people who retire who then volunteer for something. And it's because of that, they still want to do something, still want to make an impact. And actually, in our early stage, I'm in my 40s, but I can't afford to retire. The work I do, I enjoy it, but I'm doing it so I get paid so that, I can carry on living my life and to provide for children and things like that. But there's no point just working every single hour. One, you don't get to enjoy, some of the rewards maybe you've generated from income and things like that. But equally, you just end up burning out.
Yeah. And I think, what you're saying about the not enjoying the income that you've even made, not having the time, I think COVID was a huge lesson. And you see it over and over and over again of people that died before their time. People were dying having never been able to even enjoy their retirement. They're getting to 65 and then something would happen. And all of their, they'd almost delayed their living to, when I'm retired, I'll travel. And when I'm retired, I'll do this. And when I'm retired, I'll spend loads of time with my grandchildren and my children. What if you don't get that? Like, what if that time doesn't exist? Why not do it now? Why not do it alongside everything else that we're doing and make all of the memories incredible? Because you never know, it sounds really morbid, but time does run out. You never know how much time you're going to get. It's the only thing in the world that you can't buy. It's continually moving forwards. And as disappointing as it is, my parents were right. The older you get, the faster it goes. It's starting to blink and lose months at this point. And so I'm just, I'm my purpose in life, my purpose in my business, everything that I do is fueled between you make the most of right now, like here and right now, because that's what life is about. And I think, like you say, some people work just to earn money. And some people work because they are, the amount of people that I've met that have said, even if I wasn't paid for this, I would still do it. Even if I won the lottery, I would still turn up every day and do this job because that intrinsic motivation, like I am so in love with what I do. I'm kind of 50-50. I have chosen a job that I can do that I absolutely adore. And there is elements of things that I would do that I would continue even if I did win the lottery. And then there are some things that I do to earn money, to keep going on holidays and keep buying a ridiculous number of books every week. And so, there's that 50-50. I think it's okay to be fueled by either, as long as you're not always focusing on the one side. It balances both. You have to have enjoyment in both sides. You have to kind of make time for both.
It's really interesting because I've had conversations with a couple of people on this podcast. One, he was earning lots of money, but then realized, having almost had a heart attack, that actually what's the point here? And he said, he was earning all this money, he took the kids to Disneyland and almost spent the entire time walking around on the phone. It was just like, sort of, what's the point? But equally, I've had people who have lost loved ones, very early in life, and that can really give you a massive wake-up call.
Yeah.
For people who, maybe don't have that initial luxury of just, changing their job or things like that. Do you think, you mentioned living in the now, do you think trying to reduce some of that worry about work, because, 40 hours a week might be while you're working, but there's equally many more hours when you're not.
Yes.
But if we just spend that worrying about work or wasting time, do you think actually we just need to make better use of the time that we do have doing things that, do make us happy? And like you say, the things that we would regret not doing on our deathbed. Not that maybe immediate fix of, I want to scroll social media because it gives me a little buzz. Actually getting out in nature or going on holiday or speaking to a friend, something that you might really regret.
100%. Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I teach people is about boundaries and being more selfish with their time, because I think a lot of people, and you have kids, so maybe you will kind of resonate with this. Sometimes there's this almost, when I'm not working, but then now I'm dad. Now I have to do this, and I'm husband, and I'm friend, and I'm son. And well, okay, but who are you? When do you get you time? When do you get to be you for you? So I talk to a lot of people about, when the working day is done, like there is no shame. You are not a bad worker if you are not going over and above all the time, because if over and above becomes the standard, what becomes over and above? How do you kind of push if everything is always max capacity? But also, like, what else have you got to give? I remember we used to interview, university students when I worked within the recruitment company. A lot of the stuff people coming through were very young, and we wanted them to have something about themselves. We didn't want them to be like, oh, all I've ever done is study, like I've never done anything else. We love people that played sports. We love people that were part of clubs or did something that was wildly strange. It could be anything. It could be painting miniatures, could be, oh, I'm actually a chess master, whatever it was. We loved when they had something else to talk about, because communication is talking, right? And if one person's only got one subject to ever talk about, they're quite a boring person. There's nothing else to them. Like, that's not a fun conversation. So we always encourage people to have something different. But there comes this time in our career where we suddenly start to go, oh no, like I should stay a little bit longer, and I should always prove that I'm willing to commit to the job. But then when I go home, then I have to tidy up, then I have to be wife, or I have to be mother, or I have to be father. I have to, be that person for someone else. I have to manage everything for other people. And this is why people doom scroll, right? Because it's the only time that they get to switch their brain off. It's the only time they get to go, I don't have to be anyone for anything, and I'm just going to stare blankly at a screen, kind of wishing I had time to dance around in stupid clothes on a Wednesday afternoon, knowing that it'll never happen for me. But actually it could. There's literally no reason why not, right? And, going back to is it life or death? I have, when people really struggle with boundaries, when people really struggle to close their laptop at the end of their working day, I get them to answer 3 questions. And they are ridiculous. And the whole point of them is to make them laugh and realize that it's just really not that serious. So the first question is like, will anyone die? If I close my laptop right now and I walk away from my desk, is someone going to die? And I joke because my sister is an ITU nurse. Like, there is legitimately times at the end of her working day where she can't finish because people could die. They could actually die. But I work in an admin job, like realistically, like no one's going to die from the stuff that I do. It's not life or death. So I can close my laptop and walk away. It's going to be fine. The second question is, will you commit like a crime or make yourself, if you're a business owner, will you become non-compliant with the law? So, if it's the 31st of January and you've not filed your taxes, maybe you ought to stay an extra hour and just get that done.
Yeah.
But it's how rare is it that we are actually going to commit a crime by not doing a piece of work? And then the final one, and this one's just for business owners, it doesn't work for employees, but are you going to lose real money? Not hypothetical money, not if I keep marketing and I put out a post, then someone might want to buy and I might earn some money, but I'm going to have to give money back if I don't do this piece of work. I'm going to be fined. Someone's going to refuse to pay me because I've missed a deadline. Real money. Now, again, so most people are so conscientious, you're not going to get to a deadline at 5 p.m. on a Friday where you go, if I don't do this piece of work, I'm not going to get paid, because that motivation will have started on Monday.
Yeah.
So it kind of gets to the point where I'm like, so why are you staying? Why? Of course there's more to do. There's always more to do. But why are you staying at work? Just to prove that you're a really good worker? But like, what if you could just be a really good human and go and have some fun because you want to have fun? And that's your life, and you own your life, and you're the only person that can make this happen for yourself.
I love those questions. Yeah, that real money, not hypothetical money, because very often I have carried on working due to hypothetical money.
Yeah.
Whether that's, this might lead to something else, or I might win some more work, or, it is not actually real money.
It's never ending.
Yeah.
Right?
Because there's always something to do. You can't have a business and go, I've got literally nothing done. No. They are really powerful. And I mean, it's a great place to pretty much finish today, because I think everyone should ask themselves those questions to stop working. But if you were to just give one other tip to someone who's maybe struggling to set boundaries, feel they're working too much, not enjoying work, even though they maybe started the business because that was what they wanted to do. To finish today, what would be your one tip to them, or one starting point?
So the starting point that I give clients is book appointments or book meetings with people, like friends or social events, for about half an hour after you're due to finish, so that you have no choice, because you're going to let someone else down. So whether it's an exercise class or meeting up with someone for coffee or going for a run with a group, whatever it looks like, book something for straight after you're due to finish, because once you've done that social thing, you're not going to want to go back to work, and then you can then enjoy the rest of your evening. But it's going to be a timeline that it's a deadline you can't avoid. That's the starting point I always go with.
I absolutely love that. That's a brilliant tip. And I can tell you one that I used to do on a Friday. I used to always do the school pickup. Because I spent probably at least 12 months saying, I'm going to finish early on a Friday. And I probably did it twice in a year. But suddenly I committed to that, and it was something I couldn't let down. I had she was sort of reception. I couldn't leave a 5-year-old at school, just on a Friday. It was a commitment, but it made me finish nice and early. And actually, I'd been out early because I'd networked. I'd been working since 6 a.m. It was fine to finish at 3 and go and do the school one. But you're right, that commitment was the only thing that did it, because otherwise the commitment to me of, I'll try and finish early on a Friday never actually happened. But if you've got someone that you're not going to let down, that's a key one. Yeah. Alex, thank you so much for the conversation today. I've absolutely loved it. And hearing about your story, and your presentation of the disc profile and how it all works. Thank you so much. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Balanced Ambition podcast. I genuinely hope the stories inspire you as much as they inspire me. If you found value in today's conversation, please share it with a friend. And remember, by subscribing, you won't miss an episode, and it would truly mean the world to me. Stay balanced, and I'll see you next time.